The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with anticipation. Delegates from every corner of the known universe filled the grand hall, their colorful forms shimmering under the ambient lights. The topic on today's agenda had already ignited whispers across the galaxy, a matter so baffling that even the wisest minds could hardly believe it. At the center of this swirling chaos stood a single human, unassuming yet holding the attention of thousands. What had started as a routine diplomatic exchange was now the talk of every star system. It had begun on Tariq Prime, a planet known for housing the galaxy's most feared predator, the Voraks. These creatures were the stuff of nightmares, towering beasts with razor-sharp appendages, intelligent enough to strategize and vicious enough to leave no survivors. For centuries, their presence had been a constant reminder of the untamed dangers lurking in the universe. Even the bravest species kept their distance. The Voraks were considered unapproachable, uncontainable, and unquestionably lethal. But somehow, the human had changed everything. When the human delegation landed on Tariq Prime for a cultural exchange program, no one expected much. Humans were relatively new to the galactic stage, their species dismissed as fragile and inexperienced compared to the more ancient civilizations. Yet, they had a reputation for unpredictability, and it didn't take long for that to manifest in the most astonishing way. The delegation was supposed to observe the Voraks from a safe distance, protected by layers of force fields and armed guards. The protocols were strict, the risks clear. One misstep could mean certain death. Yet, as the other species watched in horror, the human broke from the group and approached the containment field. They ignored the shouted warnings, their strides deliberate and calm. The Voraks, a beast nearly twice their size, turned its glowing eyes toward the human. The air grew heavy with tension, and every observer braced for carnage. But the attack never came. Instead, something completely unprecedented happened. The human knelt, extending a hand toward the Voraks. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Surely this was a death wish, a moment of suicidal folly that would go down as a footnote in the galactic archives. Yet, as the human's hand hovered just inches from the creature's serrated maw, the impossible unfolded. The Voraks leaned forward, sniffing curiously before lowering its massive head. Then, to everyone's shock, it allowed the human to touch it. A collective gasp echoed through the viewing chamber as the human gently scratched the creature behind its fearsome spines. The Voraks emitted a low, rumbling sound that could only be described as contentment. The news spread like wildfire. Within hours, the video of the encounter was being dissected in every corner of the galaxy. Was it a trick? Some obscure human technology? Or had this member of a relatively unremarkable species achieved what no one else had dared to attempt? Theories ranged from plausible to outright absurd, but one thing was clear. The human had done the unthinkable. Now, days later, the Galactic Council had convened to address the implications of the event. The human, whose actions had disrupted centuries of understanding about the Voraks, was called to testify. Delegates whispered and speculated, their skepticism plain on their faces. What could possibly explain this phenomenon? Had the humans stumbled upon some unknown instinct? Or had they unwittingly unlocked a secret that had eluded the galaxy's greatest minds? As the humans stepped into the chamber, the tension was palpable. Beings from across the galaxy leaned forward, their attention fixed on the lone figure at the center of the room. Despite the enormity of the moment, the human appeared calm, even at ease. They carried themselves with the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing to prove. One of the delegates, A serpentine creature with scales that shimmered like liquid metal broke the silence. "Explain yourself," it hissed, its voice echoing through the hall. "What sorcery allowed you to tame a Vorax?" The human tilted their head, a small smile playing at their lips. "It's not sorcery," they said simply, their voice steady but tinged with warmth. "It's understanding." The room erupted in murmurs. "Understanding?" scoffed another delegate, its translucent wings fluttering in agitation. "The Vorax are mindless predators. They do not understand. They destroy." "Maybe that's what you've always believed," the human replied, their tone unwavering. "But belief isn't the same as truth." Before anyone could argue, the human reached into their pocket and pulled out a small holographic projector. With a quick gesture, they activated it, displaying a scene from the encounter. The Vorax's massive frame loomed on the projection, but instead of the savage beast everyone expected, it appeared calm. Its movements were slow and deliberate, its glowing eyes no longer filled with fury, but with something almost resembling curiosity. The humans stood beside it, their hand resting gently on its armored hide. "I didn't approach the Vorax with fear," the human explained, their voice carrying across the chamber. "I approached it with respect. I observed its body language, its reactions. I treated it not as a monster, but as a living being." The murmurs grew louder, a mix of intrigue and disbelief. Some delegates exchanged skeptical glances, while others appeared deeply unsettled. If what the human said was true, it challenged long-held assumptions about the Vorax and perhaps about countless other species as well. "But why?" asked a soft-spoken delegate, their voice barely audible. "Why risk your life? What could you possibly gain from such recklessness?" The human's smile faded, replaced by a seriousness that silenced the room. "Because fear creates barriers," they said, their words deliberate. "We fear what we don't understand, and that fear keeps us from seeing the bigger picture. The Vorax aren't mindless killers. They're intelligent. They're curious. And maybe, just maybe, they've been waiting for someone to see them for what they really are." The weight of the human's words hung heavy in the air. For a moment, the chamber was silent, each delegate lost in their own thoughts. The human's actions had not only defied logic, but had also forced the galaxy to confront uncomfortable truths about their own biases and assumptions. Before anyone could respond, a booming sound reverberated through the chamber. It wasn't an explosion or an attack, but something far more startling, a guttural roar that sent chills down every spine. The delegates turned toward the source of the sound, their eyes widening in disbelief. Standing at the entrance to the chamber was a Vorax. Its massive frame filled the doorway, its glowing eyes scanning the room. The guards froze, their weapons trembling in their hands. But before anyone could act, the creature stepped forward, its movements slow and deliberate. Behind it stood the human. The chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates shouted, guards scrambled, and the tension reached a fever pitch. Yet, amidst the uproar, the human raised a hand, their voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "Enough," they commanded, their tone firm but not angry. "This Vorax is not here to harm anyone." The creature stood motionless, its gaze unwavering. The humans stepped forward, their expression resolute. "This," they said, gesturing to the Vorax, "is proof that fear can be overcome. That understanding can bridge even the widest chasms. But the question is, are you willing to see the truth?" The chamber fell silent once more, the delegates staring at the human and the Vorax with a mixture of awe and uncertainty. The galaxy had changed in an instant, and nothing would ever be the same. The silence in the Galactic Council chamber felt like it could stretch forever. Every delegate was frozen, their eyes darting between the human and the Vorax standing calmly beside them. The weight of the moment pressed down on everyone present. Never before had such a thing been witnessed, one of the galaxy's deadliest predators standing not as an attacker, but as a companion. The human took a deep breath, their hands still resting on the Vorax's shoulder. They seemed aware of the gravity of their actions, yet their expression carried no trace of arrogance or triumph. Instead, they looked almost hopeful, the kind of hope that is fragile yet defiant, daring to exist despite the odds. The Vorax, massive and imposing, stood silently, its glowing eyes scanning the room as if it understood the attention it was drawing. The delegates whispered among themselves in hushed tones, their voices barely audible but filled with disbelief and tension. Some questioned the authenticity of what they were witnessing, suggesting it might be an elaborate trick or a manipulation of some kind. Others stared in a mix of wonder and apprehension, unsure whether to marvel at the sight or brace for an attack. But no one made a move, not even the guards, who had quietly raised their weapons but held their fire, seemingly paralyzed by indecision. Finally, one of the senior delegates spoke, their voice cutting through the murmur like a blade. "Explain this," they demanded, their tone sharp and commanding. The delegate, a tall, insectoid being with iridescent wings, leaned forward, their compound eyes reflecting the light. "How is it possible that this beast stands here, unharmed, controlled? What have you done?" The human didn't flinch under the scrutiny. They stepped forward slightly, their hand leaving the Vorax's shoulder and gesturing toward it as if introducing an old friend. "I haven't done anything to control it," the human began, their voice steady. "This isn't about control. It's about connection." The room buzzed again with disbelief. "Connection?" scoffed a delegate whose crystalline form glimmered with shifting colors. "With a Vorax? These creatures are ruthless killers. They don't connect. They destroy." The human turned to face the crystalline delegate, their gaze unwavering. "That's what you've always believed. But has anyone ever tried to see them as more than killers? To understand what drives them? Their actions, their instincts, their responses, they're not random. They're deliberate, calculated. That's intelligence, not mindlessness." The Vorax, as if on cue, shifted its massive head slightly, letting out a low, rumbling growl. It wasn't a threatening sound, but rather something that felt almost communicative. The human glanced at it and smiled faintly, as if they understood the gesture, then turned back to the delegates. "I didn't approach it with weapons drawn or fear in my heart. I approached it with respect. And that's what made the difference." The crystalline delegates sneered, their edges shimmering a harsh red. "Respect? You're asking us to respect a creature that has slaughtered millions across the galaxy. You're asking us to ignore centuries of bloodshed and see it as... what? A misunderstood victim? I'm asking you to consider the possibility that we've been wrong about them." The human replied calmly. "What if their aggression isn't innate, but a reaction to how we've treated them? What if the way we've always approached them, fearful, hostile, has only reinforced their behavior? I'm not excusing what they've done, but maybe the way forward isn't more conflict. Maybe it's understanding." Another delegate, a creature with silken tendrils flowing like water, leaned forward and spoke in a measured tone. "And what evidence do you have to support such a claim? A single interaction? A singular moment of apparent connection? That is hardly enough to undo what we know of the Vorax. The human nodded, acknowledging the skepticism. I understand why you doubt me. But this isn't just about this moment. They paused, their expression growing more serious. What if I told you that the Vorax aggression is tied to something deeper? Something external? I've been observing them, and I believe there's more to their behavior. The room fell silent again, the delegates hanging on the human's words. The insectoid senior delegate's mandibles clicked softly, a sign of their contemplation. What are you suggesting? They asked. I'm suggesting that the Vorax might not be acting of their own volition, the human said. There are patterns in their movements, in their attacks. They don't act like wild predators. They act like soldiers, organized, purposeful. I think they're being influenced, maybe even controlled, by something we don't fully understand yet. The murmurs returned, this time more urgent and concerned. The idea that the Vorax could be pawns in a larger game was unsettling. For centuries, they had been the galaxy's nightmare, the ultimate threat. They were merely tools for something greater. The implications were terrifying. Before anyone could respond, the Vorax let out another low growl. This time, it stepped forward slightly, its massive claws clicking against the chamber floor. The guards tensed, their weapons trembling in their hands, but the human raised a hand, signaling for calm. It's okay, they said softly, their voice carrying a quiet authority. It's not going to hurt anyone. The Vorax stopped beside the human, towering over them, yet exuding an almost eerie stillness. The human placed a hand on its side, their touch gentle but confident. This creature, they said, their voice firm. It's a victim, just like all of us. If we want to survive, if we want to truly thrive as a galaxy, we need to stop treating it like a monster and start asking the right questions. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken thoughts. The delegates looked at one another, their expressions a mix of skepticism, fear, and reluctant curiosity. The idea of reevaluating everything they thought they knew about the Vorax was daunting, even terrifying. But the human's words lingered, planting seeds of doubt in the long-held narrative. Finally, the insectoid senior delegate broke the silence once more. You speak boldly, human, they said, their voice carrying a hint of grudging respect. But bold words are not enough. If what you claim is true, then we must uncover the truth behind the Vorax actions. And if you are wrong, the consequences will be on your head. The human nodded, their gaze steady. I understand, but I believe the truth is worth the risk. The chamber remained tense, the air thick with the weight of what had been said. The human had introduced a possibility that no one had dared to consider before, challenging the very foundations of how the galaxy understood its most feared predator. Whether they were right or wrong, one thing was certain: the galaxy would never see the Vorax or the humans the same way again. The air in the Galactic Council chamber was electric, a fragile balance between curiosity and dread. The humans' bold claim about the Vorax being manipulated by an unseen force had shaken the foundation of what the galaxy thought it understood. For centuries, the Vorax had been the universal symbol of chaos, a force to be feared and eradicated. To suggest they were anything but mindless predators was heretical at best, dangerous at worst. Yet here stood the human, unyielding in their conviction, with one of these so-called monsters standing silently at their side. The senior delegates convened in hushed tones, their voices blending into a hum of uncertainty. Their skepticism was evident, but so too was their unease. If the human was right, the implications were staggering. Who or what could possess the power to influence the galaxy's most fearsome predators? And why? These questions hung in the air, unanswered, casting long shadows over the already tense room. As the council debated their next steps, the human took a moment to glance at the Vorax beside them. The creature's massive frame was still, but its eyes roamed the room, observing the chaos it had unintentionally sparked. There was intelligence in those glowing orbs, a depth that no one had ever acknowledged before. The human whispered softly, a barely audible reassurance, and the Vorax shifted its weight slightly, almost as if it understood. Suddenly, a deep, resonating chime filled the chamber, silencing the murmurs. It was the signal for an emergency announcement. The room dimmed, and a holographic screen flickered to life in the center of the hall. A harried-looking representative from the outer colonies appeared, their face pale and drawn. "Council members," they began, their voice trembling. "We have an urgent situation." The room collectively leaned forward, the tension thickening. The representative continued, "We've detected a fleet of unknown origin heading toward the Terek Prime system. Their trajectory is direct, and their numbers, they're unprecedented. We believe this may be an invasion force." A wave of alarm swept through the chamber. Delegates exchanged panicked glances, their voices rising in frantic debate. The Terek Prime system was not only the home of the Vorax, but also a key strategic location. If it fell, the entire sector could be destabilized. But the timing of this attack so soon after the humans' revelations was too coincidental to ignore. The senior delegate, the insectoid leader with iridescent wings, raised a hand for silence. "Who are these attackers?" they demanded, their voice sharp and commanding. "What do we know about their capabilities?" The representative hesitated, their expression grim. "Their technology is unlike anything we've encountered before. Initial scans show advanced weaponry, and their ships. They seem to be designed to subdue rather than destroy. It's as if their goal isn't annihilation, but control." The human's eyes narrowed, a flicker of understanding crossing their face. "Control," they murmured, more to themselves than anyone else. They turned to the Vorax, their expression thoughtful. "It's connected," they said aloud, their voice cutting through the noise. "This fleet and the Vorax, it's all part of the same puzzle." The council erupted again, voices overlapping in a cacophony of doubt and disbelief. "You expect us to believe this is connected?" A crystalline delegate snapped, their edges glinting with agitation. "This is an invasion, plain and simple." "It's more than that," the human insisted, stepping forward. "Think about it. The Vorax have been acting strangely for decades, coordinated, almost strategic. And now, a fleet with technology designed for subjugation appears out of nowhere. This isn't a coincidence. Someone or something is pulling the strings." The insectoid leader regarded the human with a measured gaze. "If you are correct," they said slowly, "then this is a threat beyond anything we've faced before. But if you are wrong—" "I'm not wrong," the human interrupted, their voice firm. "You've seen it yourselves. The Vorax can be reasoned with, understood, but only if we stop treating them as the enemy." Before the debate could continue, the holographic screen flickered again, this time displaying a live feed from the Terek Prime system. The image was chilling, a vast fleet of sleek, alien ships moving in perfect formation, their dark hulls glinting ominously against the backdrop of the stars. The Vorax on the planet below were visibly agitated, their movements erratic as the ships descended into the atmosphere. It was clear that whatever connection the human had suggested, the Vorax were reacting to the fleet's presence in a way that was anything but natural. "We don't have time to argue," the human said urgently. "If we want to stop this, we need to act now. But we can't do it alone. We need the Vorax." The room fell into a stunned silence. The idea of working alongside the galaxy's most feared predators was unthinkable. Yet the humans' determination was unshakable, their conviction like a beacon cutting through the chaos. "They're not our enemies," they repeated, their voice resolute. "They're victims, just like us. And if we want to stand a chance against whoever's behind this, we need to stand together." The insectoid leader's wings shimmered with indecision, their gaze shifting between the human, the Vorax, and the ominous fleet on the screen. Finally, they spoke, their tone heavy with the weight of their decision. "If we do this," they said, "the risks are immeasurable. But so are the stakes." They turned to the human, their compound eyes locking onto them. "You will lead this effort," they declared. "And if you fail, the consequences will fall squarely on your shoulders." The human nodded, their expression unwavering. "I understand," they said. They turned to the Vorax beside them, meeting its glowing eyes. "But I won't fail. Not if we work together." The chamber buzzed with nervous energy as plans were hastily set into motion. Delegates scrambled to coordinate fleets, send messages, and prepare for the impending conflict. But even amidst the chaos, one question loomed large in everyone's mind. Could they truly trust the Vorax? Or was this gamble a path to their own destruction? As the human and the Vorax left the chamber to prepare for what lay ahead, tension hung heavy in the air. The galaxy stood on the brink of an unprecedented alliance or an unimaginable disaster. And at the heart of it all was the fragile hope that understanding, not fear, could be the key to survival. As the human and the Vorax exited the Galactic Council chamber, the weight of the galaxy's collective gaze bore down on them. The corridors were eerily quiet, save for the hum of distant machinery and the hurried footsteps of council staff scrambling to coordinate a response. The Vorax moved with a quiet grace that belied its size, its glowing eyes scanning its surroundings as if constantly assessing unseen threats. The human, walking beside it, felt the enormity of what they were about to attempt, a fragile alliance forged in desperation, balancing on the edge of trust and chaos. In the command center, the atmosphere was charged with tension. Holographic projections of the invading fleet loomed above a massive central table, their sheer number dwarfing anything the galaxy had faced before. Military strategists argued over battle plans, their voices clashing like blades. The insectoid senior delegate stood at the head of the table, their iridescent wings flickering with agitation. When the human entered, flanked by the Vorax, the room fell silent, every pair of eyes locking onto them. "We've just received new intelligence," the insectoid leader said, their voice clipped. "Our scouts intercepted a transmission from the fleet. It confirms what you suggested. They're not here to destroy. They're here to capture." The human's stomach tightened. Capture was a fate worse than annihilation for many civilizations. It implied control, servitude, and a complete loss of autonomy. "Did the transmission reveal who's behind this?" the human asked, their voice steady despite the dread curling in their chest. The leader hesitated, their mandibles clicking softly. No clear identification. But there was something strange. The language used in the transmission was not entirely foreign. It bore traces of human syntax. A ripple of shock moved through the room. The human froze, their mind racing. Human syntax? They repeated, disbelief mingling with unease. Are you saying humans are involved in this? We don't know, the leader replied, their tone grim. But it raises questions. If this fleet has ties to humanity, then perhaps their connection to the Vorax isn't coincidental. The humans' thoughts swirled. The pieces of the puzzle were shifting, forming a picture they couldn't yet see. But one thing was clear, the stakes were higher than anyone had imagined. If humanity was somehow tied to this invasion, it wasn't just their reputation on the line, it was their very existence. As they stood there, grappling with this revelation, an alarm blared through the command center. A holographic display flickered, shifting to a live feed from the Terek Prime system. The alien fleet was making its move, descending on the planet with chilling precision. The Vorax on the surface reacted with ferocity, their primal instincts taking over as they launched a counterattack. But something about their movements seemed off, disjointed, almost pained. The Vorax beside the human let out a low, guttural growl, its glowing eyes narrowing as it watched its kin struggle. The human glanced at it, sensing its agitation. "What is it?" they asked softly, their voice barely audible over the chaos. The Vorax didn't respond in words. Of course, it couldn't, but its body language spoke volumes. It shifted uncomfortably, its claws scraping against the floor. The human felt a pang of understanding. "You can feel it, can't you?" they murmured. "Whatever's controlling them, it's hurting them." Before they could say more, the insectoid leader's voice cut through the din. "We can't wait any longer. If we don't act now, Terek Prime will fall." The human nodded, the resolve hardening. "Then we need to get down there. If we're going to help the Vorax, we need to understand what's happening to them. And I think this one," they gestured to the Vorax beside them, "can help us do that." The council balked at the suggestion. "You want to take one of those into a war zone?" A crystalline delegate exclaimed, their edges glowing with alarm. "That's madness." "It's the only way," the human insisted. "This Vorax isn't like the others. It's free from whatever's controlling them. It might be the key to breaking the others free too." Reluctantly, the council agreed. A small team was assembled, including the human, the Vorax, and a handful of trusted soldiers. As they boarded a sleek transport ship bound for Tariq Prime, the human couldn't shake the feeling that they were heading straight into the heart of the storm. As the transport hurtled through hyperspace, the human studied the Vorax closely. It seemed uneasy, its massive frame tense, its claws tapping rhythmically against the floor. "You're worried about them, aren't you?" the human asked quietly. The Vorax tilted its head slightly, a gesture that felt almost like a nod. The human sighed. "Me too," they admitted. "But we're going to figure this out. I promise." The descent to Terek Prime was turbulent, the atmosphere thick with energy from the battle raging below. As the ship touched down on the outskirts of a Vorax stronghold, the team disembarked, their weapons at the ready. The human and the Vorax led the way, the unlikely duo cutting a path through the chaos. The stronghold was in disarray. Vorax warriors fought desperately against the invading forces, their movements wild and erratic. The human could see it now, the pain in their actions, the confusion in their eyes. Whatever was controlling them was tearing them apart from the inside. As the team pressed deeper into the stronghold, at the heart of the invasion was a massive alien device, pulsing with an otherworldly energy. It was surrounded by the invaders, who worked tirelessly to maintain its operations. The human's breath caught in their throat. This was the key to everything. But before they could act, the Vorax beside them let out a roar, a sound of both rage and recognition. The invaders turned, their weapons raised, and chaos erupted once more. In the heat of the battle, the human caught a glimpse of something that made their blood run cold. One of the invaders, an imposing figure clad in sleek, alien armor, turned toward them, and for a brief moment, their visor reflected the unmistakable features of a human face. The battlefield surged with chaos as the invaders, alerted to the team's presence, closed in. The human barely had time to process the shocking glimpse of a familiar face within the alien armor before they were forced to act. Their training kicked in as they ducked behind cover, signaling to the team to hold their ground. The Vorax at their side didn't hesitate, leaping into the fray with a roar that reverberated through the stronghold. It tore through the invaders with a ferocity that was both terrifying and mesmerizing, its movements a blur of claws and raw power. The device at the center of the room pulsed ominously, emitting waves of energy that seemed to ripple through the air. The human could feel it now, a pressure in their chest, a tingling at the base of their skull. This was more than just a machine. It was alive in some way, its presence heavy and malevolent. The Vorax, too, reacted to it, its movements faltering momentarily as it growled in apparent pain. Whatever this thing was, it was the key to everything. "We need to shut that down," the human shouted, their voice barely audible over the din of battle. The team pushed forward, cutting a path toward the device. The Vorax stayed close to the human, its massive form shielding them from incoming fire. Together, they fought their way to the heart of the stronghold, the device looming larger with every step. As they reached the base of the machine, the human's mind raced. The technology was unlike anything they'd seen before, organic and mechanical elements intertwined in a way that defied logic. There were no obvious controls, no switches or panels to disable. The energy it emitted seemed to resonate with something deep within them, a disconcerting echo that made their skin crawl. Suddenly, the armored figure stepped forward, their weapon raised. The human froze, their heart pounding as they locked eyes with the figure's visor. The resemblance to humanity was unmistakable, but there was something off. The figure hesitated for a moment, their weapon lowering slightly as if in recognition. "You shouldn't have come here," the figure said, their voice distorted but undeniably human. "You don't understand what's at stake." The human took a cautious step forward, their weapon lowered but ready. "Then explain it to me," they said, their tone firm but laced with curiosity. "What is this? What are you doing to the Vorax?" The figure tilted their head, as if considering the question. "The Vorax were never meant to be free," they said. "They're tools designed to bring order to chaos. But you've disrupted everything." "Designed?" the human repeated, their stomachs sinking. The pieces clicked into place, forming a picture they wished they couldn't see. The Vorax weren't just victims of some external force, they were created by it. And now, that force was trying to reassert control. "You're human," the human said, their voice barely above a whisper. "Why would you do this?" The figure hesitated again, a flicker of something regret crossing their stance. "Because chaos must be controlled," they said finally. "The galaxy is too vast, too unpredictable. Without order, it will tear itself apart." The humans shook their head, their anger flaring. "You think this is order? Forcing creatures to fight your battles, stripping them of their will. That's not order. That's tyranny." Before the figure could respond, the Vorax let out a deafening roar. It surged forward, knocking the figure aside with a swipe of its massive claw. The human took the opportunity to approach the device, their hands searching for any way to disable it. The energy waves grew stronger, the pressure in their chest almost unbearable. The Vorax, sensing the human's struggle, joined them, its claws ripping into the machine with a primal fury. The device sparked and sputtered, its pulses growing erratic. The armored figure stumbled to their feet, their visor cracked, revealing part of their face. It was human, fully, undeniably human. The humans stared, their breath catching in their throat. "Who are you?" they demanded, their voice shaking. The figure's expression was unreadable. "Someone who understands the cost of freedom," they said. "More than you ever will." With that, they retreated, vanishing into the chaos as the device began to collapse. The human didn't have time to dwell on the cryptic statement. The machine was failing, its energy spiraling out of control. "We need to get out of here," they shouted, grabbing the Vorax's arm. The creature hesitated, its glowing eyes fixed on the remnants of the device before turning to follow. The team barely made it out before the device exploded in a blinding flash of light. The shockwave rippled through the stronghold, knocking everyone to the ground. When the dust settled, the human looked up to see the Vorax around them silent, still, and free. The wildness in their eyes was gone, replaced by something deeper, more aware. The Vorax they had fought so hard to save were no longer pawns, they were individuals. But the battle wasn't over. The fleet in orbit still loomed, and the figure's ominous words echoed in the human's mind. The galaxy had been given a taste of freedom, but it was clear that forces far greater than they'd imagined were determined to keep it in check. As they looked at the Vorax standing beside them, the fight wasn't over, but they wouldn't face it alone. And with allies like these, anything felt possible. The stronghold lay in ruins, the echoes of the explosion fading into an uneasy silence. The Vorax warriors, now freed from the device's control, stood motionless, their massive forms casting long shadows under the dim light of Tariq Prime's twin moons. The human looked around, their hearts still pounding from the intensity of the battle. Relief mingled with the heavy weight of uncertainty. They had won a critical victory, but the questions that remained were as vast as the galaxy itself. The Vorax that had fought alongside them remained at their side, its glowing eyes scanning the horizon as if searching for threats. The bond they had forged was unlike anything the human had ever experienced, something born not of command, but of trust and mutual respect. They reached out a hand, resting it gently on the creature's thick fur. "We did it," they said softly, their voice breaking the quiet. "But it's not over yet." The team regrouped, their faces etched with exhaustion and a sense of wary triumph. The soldier leading the unit gave a grim nod. "The device is destroyed, but the fleet is still out there. What's our next move?" The human hesitated, their thoughts racing. The destruction of the device had freed the Vorax on the ground, but it was clear the invasion was far from over. The fleet above Tariq Prime was a looming threat, and the enigmatic figure in the armor was still out there, carrying secrets that could change everything. "We need to get back to the Council," the human said finally. "They need to know what we found." The journey back to the Galactic Council was tense. The humans spent much of the time in deep thought, replaying the armored figure's words over and over. "Chaos must be controlled." The statement lingered, raising more questions than it answered. Who were they? How had they come to wield such power? And why did they claim to understand the cost of freedom better than anyone else? When they arrived at the council chambers, the atmosphere was electric. News of the battle on Tariq Prime had spread quickly, and the destruction of the control device was already being hailed as a turning point in the conflict. The humans stood before the assembly, recounting everything they had witnessed: the device, its effects on the Vorax, and the mysterious figure who had intervened. The reaction was immediate and divided. Some delegates celebrated the victory, convinced it was a sign that the tide was turning. Others were more cautious, their concerns focused on the implications of what had been revealed. The idea that the Vorax had been created, not born, sent ripples of unease through the room. The revelation that humans might somehow be connected to the invaders only deepened the tension. The insectoid leader, their wings shimmering with agitation, turned to the human. If the Vorax were designed as tools, as you say, then who designed them? And why would humans be involved in such a thing? The humans shook their head. I don't know, they admitted. But the figure we encountered, they were human. Or at least, they appeared to be. And they seemed to know more than they were willing to share. The council erupted into debate, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of speculation and fear. The human felt the weight of the galaxy's eyes on them, their trust in humanity hanging by a thread. We need answers, the insectoid leader said firmly. And we need them now. The decision was made to launch a mission to investigate the origins of the device and its creators. The human volunteered to lead the effort, accompanied by a small team of specialists and, of course, the Vorax that had become their steadfast ally. Together, they set out to uncover the truth, following the faint traces of the device's energy signature to a remote and uncharted system. The journey was long and fraught with danger. The closer they got to their destination, the more hostile the environment became. Strange anomalies disrupted their navigation systems, and the crew began to experience vivid, disorienting dreams that seemed to echo the device's energy. The human, too, felt the pull of something vast and incomprehensible, a force that seemed to call to them from the edges of their consciousness. When they finally arrived, they found themselves in the shadow of a colossal structure, a station unlike anything they had ever seen. Its architecture was alien, yet oddly familiar, its surface covered in intricate patterns that seemed to shift and flow like liquid. The station pulsed with the same energy as the device on Tariq Prime, its presence both awe-inspiring and deeply unsettling. Inside, the team discovered a repository of knowledge, ancient records that revealed the true origins of the Vorax and the enigmatic figure in the armor. The Vorax had been created long ago by a group of rogue scientists who sought to engineer the perfect enforcers of order. These scientists, it turned out, were humans' descendants of an ancient exploratory mission that had become stranded in this remote part of the galaxy. Over generations, their ideology had warped into a belief that the galaxy needed to be controlled at any cost. The figure in the armor was one of them, a leader among their ranks who had grown disillusioned with their methods but remained bound by their conviction that chaos was the greatest threat to life. The station had been their stronghold, a place where they refined their creations and orchestrated their plans. But it was also a place of torment, where the line between creation and control had blurred beyond recognition. The team's discovery sent shockwaves through the Galactic Council. The revelation that humans were responsible for the Vorax and the chaos that had followed was both a vindication and a source of deep unease. It forced the galaxy to confront uncomfortable truths about the nature of control, freedom, and the cost of peace. In the end, the human and their Vorax allies stood together before the Council, their bond a testament to what was possible when trust and respect replaced fear and domination. The Vorax, no longer tools of war, began to find their place among the galaxy's civilizations, their newfound freedom a symbol of hope. The armored figure was never seen again, their fate a mystery that lingered in the minds of all who had encountered them. But their words remained, a haunting reminder of the delicate balance between order and chaos. The galaxy had changed, its people united, not by control, but by a shared determination to forge their own destiny. As the human reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment, they felt a sense of quiet resolve. The fight for freedom was never truly over, but it was a fight worth having. And with allies like the Voraks by their side, they knew they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, they would shape the future, not through domination, but through understanding, trust, and the unyielding spirit of those who refuse to be controlled.